If you're a DIY maker like me, making use of whatever space you can find, then you've probably had one or two conversations like this.
I don't care what it was noise and I'm not having it.
And if you actually value good relationships with your neighbours, then it can make a real impact on how often you actually get outside and make. Put this roof on our driveway to keep the weather out, but now it's time to keep something in. And I think I found an effective way to reduce noise, save you some money, and most importantly, keep you making. Oh, that is better than I expected. Hey, it's Pete here from Northern Works. One of the most common questions I get from viewers is, how on earth do you get away with building furniture on your driveway without annoying the neighbours? And the truth is, I don't. Obviously, I don't mean I'm trying to be a nuisance, but I do find that I limit the amount of time that I spend out here. And that's really because of two things that are spewing off the driveway: sound and sawdust. So in this episode, I'm going to show you how I'm tackling both of those things and hopefully keeping a couple of annoying things out of the workshop too. And no, I'm not talking about the dog. Now, there is a best way to soundproof a room. You'd usually start with two walls with an air gap in between them. You fill the space in the walls with heavy, dense insulation, and then you'd skin the outsides, usually with 2 layers of plasterboard with something heavy and dense in the middle, like a vinyl. And then you would add a floating insulated floor and finish the whole space off with soundproof doors and windows. But I haven't really got the time or the budget for most of that. Plus, I'm not going for complete soundproofing. I just want to reduce the noise enough to not be a nuisance. So I've made a list of the material options that I think could work well in this space, and I've given them scores in 4 categories: lightweight, low cost, high soundproofing, and how sustainably I can get hold of that material. I've brought together a set of materials that are all 50 millimeters thick, which is really the limit of what I can fit into my space. And I think this would work pretty well if you're doing something like a shed. How did they all stack up? Well, in terms of cost, there is that massive outlier there with the polyurethane acoustic board, but it has to be said, this is a specialist product, so I would expect it to be a bit more expensive. But it's also an outlier in terms of its weight. It's massively, massively heavier than anything else on this list, which isn't good for my use, but it has to be said that that extra weight is what gives it its good acoustic performance. You can see there that polystyrene board is so far performing pretty well, but it's absolutely terrible in terms of actual noise cancellation. So if that's what you're looking for, polystyrene board I think is out here. Again, you can see that that acoustic board and the sisal wool actually have really, really good noise performance. Rock wool, which is often cited as being one of the best things for noise cancellation, does perform pretty well according to the stats. However, like lots of other things on this list, it is virgin material, it's non-renewable, and a lot of it ends up in landfill, so it doesn't get a really good carbon score, unlike sisal wool, which is made of 2 natural fibres, one from sheep and one from the sisal plant. And seeing everything laid out like this with the traffic lights, it's actually really helped me make my decision. Hold on, before I can put in any kind of insulation, I first need to find a way of weatherproofing these massive holes in the side of the driveway. That's why I've got thousands of featherboards stacked up, so I can use this square timber to make some frames, clad them in the featherboards, and then use those to fill in the gaps. I'm going to wrap the frame in this breathable waterproof membrane, which will go underneath the featherboards and should act like a second skin to protect the insulation. These feather boards are actually very slightly too wide for the gaps, so I'm using one side of the frame as my guide to make sure everything is straight, and then at the other end I'll come back later and saw off the excess. And while I'm here, I want to say a huge thank you to Luke, one of my subscribers, who very generously has sent me his old nail gun, which has made this project way faster. So a big thank you to you, Luke. And if you found this useful in any way, then consider subscribing. I promise you don't have to send me anything. Now that all these boards are on, you can see that I've still got a bit of a gap at the top of the panel. So I'm going to have to go and put some feather boards up on the outside of the top plate as well, so that everything has good protection from the overhang. Well, I've got 3 more of those to make, but at least now I can show you what I've chosen for the insulation. And what I've chosen is sheep's wool, because for me it had the best combination of all the factors on my list. Plus, I can cut it with a bread knife. It's definitely got a kind of agricultural smell, that's for sure, which means Archie is very interested in it. Now, before I put the skin on these panels, there is one more annoying thing I'm trying to stop coming in, and that's noise from the road. Now, admittedly, that is only annoying if you're trying to make videos, but if you are trying to make videos, it's incredibly annoying having to stop and wait for cars to go by. These gates are brilliant. I built them myself and I'm really proud of them, but they do have one dirty little secret, which is they are sagging a little bit. And that's because when I put them on, I ran out of material and I didn't quite finish the cross bracing properly. So before I can fill them with insulation and put skin on them, I'm going to take them off the hinges and fix that first. That is not going to happen. I'll go to plan B and I'll do it while it's still on the hinges. Now those are done, I can put the membrane and the sheep's wool in, just like on the panels. Right, it's time to get the skin on. For now, this 6mm plywood is the best that I could do, but based on my research, I think I will have to come back and add something a bit denser, maybe some OSB in the future. One thing I didn't expect is how much lighter it is in here now. There's just one more thing I want to do with some leftover sheep's wool and then time to test it. Summer has finally turned up in the northwest of England, but one downside of that is all this new sheep's wool is It's extra fragrant at the moment. Well, I'm really happy with how this looks, but I guess the only important question is, did it work? And to test that, I set up 2 identical experiments. I put a microphone and my iPhone with a sound meter app on it outside on the driveway, and then I ran the circular saw with dust extraction, and I used that to cut 2 pieces of plywood. And I've not looked at these results yet, so it'll be a surprise to me as well. Hopefully it'll be better. Okay, this is the before. That is incredibly loud. That is very, very loud. I mean, that's unsafely loud. And let's have a look at after, see if it made any difference. Oh, that is better than I expected. That's actually quite a big difference. What's that, about 12 decibels quieter? Actual numbers themselves probably aren't that good, and I've no idea whether these are accurate, but to see that change is really encouraging. Now, one thing I know for sure, having seen these results, is that I still need to be very mindful about when I actually run the circular saw, because that's still massively loud and going to be really annoying for the neighbours. Well, there you go. There's proof, if you wanted it, that you can use sheep to reduce the sound coming out of your workshop. Now, I know it's not perfect. I've got far too many holes left in the roof and that massive one at the end, but the whole thing cost me about 300 quid, so I'm pretty pleased with that. And most importantly, it means I can get back to making furniture in this workshop, which I'm pretty pleased about. And before you ask me, no, it doesn't still smell like a farmyard. See you again.